Imagine one sentence cracking a shell that took years to polish. The municipal court in Providence hums with small sounds, waxed benches faintly sweet, conditioned air whispering, papers sighing as they're turned. Men and women past 50 clear their throats and settle. A young man steps to the mic with the stride of someone who knows people. Julian Romano, 27, expensive blazer, no tie. He sets an envelope on the table without looking at it. "My father's a retired judge," he says, smiling as if sharing a password. "We'll handle this quickly." The charges sting precisely because they sound small. Failure to make a complete stop at a pedestrian crosswalk. Tuesday, October 7th, 2025, 8:11 a.m. at the Providence Art Club. Standing in a fire lane, same morning, 8:26 a.m., curbside by the Rhode Island State House. On the dash, during the second stop, a souvenir hanger from a banquet. IRET. Judge. Dangling where it would be seen. Judge Caprio regards him with that warm, even look that isn't indulgence. He doesn't speak. The quiet tightens the room until you can hear the pen cap click in his fingers. "Mr. Romano," he says at last, voice level, "tell me what happened at 8:11. Julian taps the envelope with one finger. Tap, tap. A soft metronome of confidence. No one was there. And honestly, we're all family here, aren't we? A low exhale rolls through the back row at that word. Family. The judge nods to the clerk. The envelope opens with a paper whisper. Inside, a letter of recommendation, asking for leniency, apparently from the retired judge himself. The clerk's eyes flick. The signature sits on the page like a pasted seal, too clean, too flat. A murmur trembles and goes still. The officer reads from his report, voice dry and factual. At the rolling stop, a woman with a cane had already placed her foot on the zebra. Julian's sedan eased past the line, the nose inching over paint until she stepped back. Body cam audio from the second stop plays a few clipped seconds. The hush of morning, the car idling in a red stenciled fire lane, the tinny jangle of the dash tag. Julian's voice, light, affable. "Take a good look. That says, retired judge. We understand each other?" The judge lets the clip end. He doesn't scold. He lets the silence do the work. Somewhere, a throat clicks. Leather settles. The ceiling unit breathes. Julian's tone stays rich, a trace of laughter curling his sentence ends. His finger returns to the envelope. Tap. Caprio slides the envelope back across the wood, the motion slow enough to be heard. "Set this aside." He leans forward, not unkind. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Romano." A beat. Without titles. The room holds its breath. The shell he wore in presses and luncheons doesn't fit under these lights. The envelope rests between them like an object that has lost its magic. And with nothing left to present but himself, the smile on Julian's face pauses, just long enough for the next scene to begin. Julian straightened his shoulders, the way he'd seen his father do before sentencing a case, but his thumb twitched against the edge of his phone. The faint tremor betrayed what his smile hid. "I grew up in courts," he began. "My father served 30 years. Everyone in this building knows his name. I run our family foundation. We fund scholarships for young lawyers. That morning, I was delivering documents to the Capitol. That's all." Judge Caprio listened without interrupting, his hands folded neatly, a clock ticking in the background with surgical precision. "You were in a hurry?" "Yes, sir. A meeting at Legislative Services, 8:30 sharp." The clerk's fingers danced across her keyboard. "From the art club to the State House, at that hour, 12 minutes minimum, if you stop at the lights," she said softly. Julian looked up, defensive. "I know the route. I've driven it 100 times." And yet, the judge said, you managed it in 15 minutes, with 2 stops for police. Efficient. A small ripple of laughter ran through the gallery, quickly silenced by Caprio's glance. Julian pressed on. I also had to pick up my father for a medical appointment at 9:15. I was juggling too much. The officer raised a document. Your father left a voicemail that morning, 7:02 a.m. Julian, drive carefully. Marco will take me. And don't use my name. The words landed like a dropped weight. The judge leaned forward slightly. Seems your schedule was freer than you claimed. Julian's tone hardened. You're painting me like some entitled kid. I've worked hard. Our foundation sponsors legal ethics programs. The clerk pulled up a city database. Curious. No logged volunteer hours under your name for the last 2 years, though your foundation posts regular photos, community cleanups, youth events. Those are organized by staff, Julian muttered. So you fund virtue, Caprio said quietly, but never attend it. The silence afterward stretched. Dust motes drifted in a beam of light cutting across the bench. Julian tried again, voice slower now. I've seen this court since I was a boy. My father told me judgment is sacred, something earned. And when did it become something inherited? Caprio asked. No answer. The clerk adjusted her glasses, eyes on the printout. Your father retired 5 years ago. Since then, 3 citations linked to vehicles registered to your name. All dismissed after informal requests. Shall we call that coincidence? Julian looked down at his hands. I didn't ask for favors. People just knew who I was. That's exactly the problem, the judge said. His voice was calm, but each word cut cleanly. When people bend rules for you, they also bend your spine. Sooner or later, you can't stand straight on your own. A faint shuffle ran through the audience. Someone coughed. The air felt heavy with a truth too simple to argue. Caprio let the silence return before asking, Tell me, Mr. Romano, what did your father mean when he said, Don't use my name? Julian opened his mouth, then closed it again. The arrogance was gone. In its place, a boy who'd never been asked to answer. Because, the judge continued softly, a name is not a shield. It's a mirror. The faint sound of the pen cap clicking again echoed in the still room. The judge gestured toward the clerk. Let's move past the story and into the facts. The lights dimmed slightly as the clerk activated the courtroom screen. The glow flickered across Julian's face. Blue, sterile, merciless. Now, Caprio said, his voice low and steady, let's see what the evidence says when words run out. The first frame froze on the screen. The corner of Thomas and Benefit Street. Timestamp 8:11:03 a.m. A woman with a cane stepping forward. The room fell completely still. And just like that, the story he'd tried to sell began to collapse under its own footage. The lights dimmed, and the courtroom screen flickered to life. A square of cold blue light cutting across polished benches. No one spoke. The only sound was the whir of the projector and the faint hum of the air system, a mechanical heartbeat marking every second before the truth arrived. At 8:11:03 a.m., the camera caught the corner of Benefit and Thomas Street. A woman stepped onto the crosswalk, one hand gripping a cane, the other clutched around a paper bag. At 8:11:06, a black sedan rolled forward, nose crossing the white line. At 8:11:08, the woman stumbled back, startled, while a young volunteer reached for her elbow. The car didn't stop completely. It simply coasted past, as if the world had paused for its convenience. The footage froze. Julian's sedan, glossy and immaculate, reflected a pale sunrise, and in that glare, his own indifference. Judge Caprio didn't move. "That's you?" Julian's throat tightened. "Yes, but—" "No, no, but. Just yes or no?" "Yes." The judge's voice stayed calm. "And at 8:26? Another video began. A curb marked Fire Lane. Julian's car idled there, engine humming. On the dash, a badge hung clearly. Rhett, Judge. His voice came from the body cam, smooth, confident, faintly amused. "My father wrote these rules." Caprio paused the video. The words echoed, tinny and hollow through the speakers. "You used the name of a man who spent 3 decades defending laws to break one." Julian looked at the floor. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" He had no answer. The clerk clicked again. A DMV record, the expired dealer plate, the PDF metadata of the letter from his father. The creation time, 7:41 a.m., minutes before the first violation. The author tag, J. Romano. "Did you write this letter yourself?" Caprio asked. Julian's lips parted. "I drafted it. He would have agreed with it." "So you spoke for him," the judge said softly. "Without asking." Julian exhaled through his nose, jaw tightening. "I was trying to protect his name." "No," Caprio replied, voice low but steady. "You were trying to hide behind it." Then came the unexpected sound of movement in the audience, a slow scrape of a chair. An elderly woman stood, gray hair pinned neatly, one hand gripping the very same cane from the video. "Your Honor," she said, voice thin but firm. "May I?" The judge nodded. She faced Julian. "I'm the woman you didn't see. I wasn't hurt, but that's not the point. You looked right through me, like I was a stop sign that didn't count." Her cane tapped the floor once, sharp as a gavel. "Your father used to greet me every morning when I cleaned his courtroom. He'd say, 'Justice starts with noticing who's in front of you.' You didn't even slow down." Julian's eyes lifted briefly, then fell again. His face lost color. "Ma'am," he whispered, "I didn't see you." "That," she said, "is exactly what scares me." The courtroom held its breath. Even the clerk stopped typing. Caprio finally broke the silence. "Mr. Romano, there's a phrase lawyers use, 'do care.' It means you have to care enough to look. The law can't teach empathy, but sometimes a courtroom can." Julian's hands clenched, the phone he'd been holding creaking in his grip. His voice came out small, almost boyish. "I thought I was careful." "You were careful about everything that made you look important," the judge said. "Not the things that made you human." A faint cough echoed from the back row, or maybe it was someone trying not to cry. The lights flickered off, and when they came back, the judge's tone shifted. "We're not finished. There's someone who just entered the courtroom." The door opened quietly. The man standing there was older, shoulders straight despite age, a thin folder under his arm. His silver hair caught the light, and the clerk inhaled audibly at the sight of him. "Judge Romano," Caprio said gently. "You came." The retired judge nodded once, his expression unreadable. "I did. I believe the court deserves the truth." Every head turned. The sun froze. The air went still again, the kind of silence that arrives only before something irreversible. The door closed softly behind him, yet the sound sliced through the courtroom like a verdict. Judge Antonio Romano, 72, composed, still carrying the quiet authority of the bench, stepped forward with a thin folder in his hand. His black coat brushed the wooden rail as he approached the microphone. He did not look at his son. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, low. "If the court allows, I would like to clarify a few matters." Judge Caprio inclined his head. "Please." Antonio faced the room, his eyes moving not to the judge's bench, but to the people in the audience. The clerk, the officer, the woman with the cane. "That letter in the envelope," he began, "is not mine. I never signed it. I told my son this morning, do not use my name." He set a document on the table. Notarized, time-stamped, 7:45 a.m., October 7th. This is my statement from that morning. It reads, "My son should be treated as any other citizen of Providence." The words hung in the air. The clerk blinked twice before taking the paper. Julian's shoulders twitched, as if he'd been struck, but his father's gaze didn't shift toward him. Antonio continued, quieter now. "The woman you nearly struck, Mrs. Davis, she used to clean my courtroom after I retired. She walked with that same cane. I made sure she always had time to cross before I left the parking lot. Respect," he paused, "is not a matter of timing. It's a matter of sight." Julian flinched. "Dad!" Antonio lifted one hand, silencing him without raising his voice. "For 30 years, I told defendants that law without empathy is machinery, and yet I raised a son who treated it like armor." He reached into the folder again, producing something small. A faded brass badge engraved Judge. 1. I returned this 5 years ago when I retired. Whatever hangs on your dashboard is a souvenir, not authority. You wear it, but it doesn't make you me. The badge clinked against the wooden surface. The sound carried, bright, final. Julian's voice broke through, brittle. "You don't understand. I was just—" "No," Antonio interrupted. "You were not just. You were my son, and you forgot what that should mean." The gallery was motionless. The woman with the cane had her hands folded over its handle, her knuckles white. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Judge Caprio's eyes softened, but his tone remained even. "Judge Romano, your integrity does you credit. The record will reflect your statement." Antonio inclined his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. I did not come here to defend my name, only to return it to where it belongs." He finally turned to his son. For a heartbeat, the years between them collapsed, not as father and judge, but as two men who had lost sight of each other. "I won't lecture you, Julian," he said quietly, "but I will tell you this. When I stopped being a judge, I learned to be accountable again. It's time you did too." He stepped back. The silence that followed was not the stunned quiet of scandal, but something heavier. Recognition. Julian lowered his head. The mask of entitlement that had carried him through every room seemed to dissolve under the weight of that public disavowal. Caprio tapped his pen once against the desk, measured and calm. "Thank you, Judge Romano. Your statement provides clarity." Antonio nodded once and returned to his seat near the back, deliberately, not beside his son. Caprio turned toward the clerk. "All right," he said. "We return to the facts." The lights dimmed again. On the screen, a timeline began to form, minute by minute, document by document. Each click of the mouse was a heartbeat, each pause a countdown. Julian stared at the glowing data, every time stamp, every digital signature, and knew that from this moment, excuses would no longer hold. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but implacable. "Mr. Romano, we've seen your story. Now, let's see the truth." And with that, the courtroom became a ledger. Every second of that morning laid bare under a light too bright to lie beneath. The lights dimmed again, and the courtroom shifted from emotion to evidence, from confession to calculation. The projector flickered, casting sterile blue over the polished oak. The clerk's voice was steady, almost mechanical, as if removing any warmth might spare the room from shame. Timeline of events, October 7th, 2025, 8 to 8:30 a.m. A map appeared. Benefit Street to the State House. Arrows traced the route like arteries of accountability. 8:11:03, she read. The video replayed, Mrs. Davis stepping onto the crosswalk. 8:11:06. The defendant's vehicle crosses the stop line. 8:11:08. Contact avoided by volunteer intervention. No one breathed. The clip paused on the frozen image of the sedan, glinting in morning light. 8:26, she continued. Vehicle recorded in a marked fire lane outside the Capitol. Dashboard tag, Arit, Judge. Verbal statement from defendant. My father wrote these rules. Caprio's tone didn't rise or fall. And yet, you broke them. Julian's jaw flexed, but he stayed silent. The clerk advanced the slides, DMV records, plate expiration, metadata from the fabricated letter. Each fact struck like a soft hammer, small blows that accumulated weight. Created, 7:41 a.m. User, J. Romano. Signature. Image file, she read. Caprio folded his hands. You didn't just bend the truth, Mr. Romano. You edited it. Julian's throat worked. I thought it would make things easier. The judge's response was quiet, but it filled the room. Lies always do. That's why people choose them. Next came the email from Legislative Services, time-stamped 5:42 p.m. the night before. The meeting moved to 11. The read receipt from Julian's account showed 6:03 p.m. So you weren't late, Caprio said. You were impatient. The clerk brought up one final file, an email chain from 9:12 a.m., the morning of the violation. Subject line, PR tension. Julian's public relations team offering to donate safety equipment to de-escalate community criticism. Buying silence, Caprio asked. Julian didn't answer. From the audience came the faint scrape of Mrs. Davis's cane against the floor. Deliberate, rhythmic, like punctuation. The clerk switched slides again. A close-up photograph of the stop sign appeared. A new chip marked its edge, raw metal gleaming. A second image followed. The car's front bumper, matching height, matching scrape. Caprio exhaled slowly. You didn't just fail to stop. You took a piece of the law with you. Julian's composure cracked. I didn't see it. That's the pattern, the judge said. You never see what doesn't serve you. The woman, the sign, the boundary. He closed the folder in front of him with a single precise motion. The sound was like a gavel in miniature. Mr. Romano, he said, this isn't about fines. It's about trust, a currency your family once minted in abundance. You've spent it recklessly. Julian's voice came faintly, almost swallowed. What happens now? Caprio studied him for a long moment. Now, we stop pretending that reputation is the same as character. He turned to the clerk. Prepare restitution documents. Restitution, Julian echoed. Yes, Caprio said. You'll repair what you broke, and not just the sign. He listed it clearly, his tone factual, but edged with something human. Compensation for the damaged signage and volunteer equipment, reimbursement for Mrs. Davis's therapy bills, 60 hours of supervised service in morning crosswalk shifts, completion of a defensive driving and civic ethics course. Each condition landed like a rung on a descending ladder, one he would have to climb back up on his own. The room was silent when the judge finally leaned back. We'll reconvene for sentencing confirmation next week, he said. Until then, I suggest you start learning how to stop, not just at intersections. He tapped the file once. Court adjourned for review. But no one moved. The air in the room was thick, unmoving, the kind that follows truth when it arrives too late. As the lights came back up, Julian remained seated, staring at the empty blue glow on the wall. For the first time in his life, There was no one left to speak for him, and nowhere left to hide. In the quiet that followed, Mrs. Davis rose slowly, her cane striking the floor once. The sound echoed across the wooden benches. And that was how the lesson began to take root. Not in words, but in the silence that made them real. A week later, the same courtroom filled again. Older faces, folded hands, murmurs dying as the door closed. The morning light cut across the benches, thin and cold. Judge Caprio entered quietly, the rhythm of his steps echoing through the silence. Case 4027, Julian Romano. When Julian stood, the arrogance was gone. His suit was plain, sleeves rolled to his forearms, fingers stained faintly with orange reflective paint, the kind used on crosswalk posts. He looked thinner, quieter, different. Caprio's eyes softened slightly. "You've completed the hours?" "Yes, Your Honor. 60, as ordered. I worked the morning shifts, the school crossings on Hope Street." The judge nodded. "And?" Julian hesitated, then smiled faintly. "At first, no one looked at me. I was just the man holding the sign. But on the third day, a kid waved every morning. He told me his grandfather used to stop traffic there. Said he was the bravest man in Providence. That's when I realized," he faltered, "that I've spent my whole life trying to be seen, not to see." Caprio folded his hands. "What else did you learn?" "That people don't remember titles, sir. They remember who waits for them to cross." The gallery was still. A few in the back nodded. Caprio leaned forward slightly. "There's something else you've brought today, I believe." Julian reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check and a photo. "For Mrs. Davis," he said, "to cover her therapy sessions. And the picture, it's of the new sign we installed together. She supervised." The judge raised an eyebrow. "She did?" Julian nodded, a hint of warmth returning to his voice. "She made me repaint it twice until it was perfectly white. Said, 'If you can't see the line, you'll never respect it.'" A ripple of laughter broke the tension, small but genuine. The doors at the back opened softly. Judge Antonio Romano entered. No folder this time, no distance in his expression. He walked straight to the bench and stood beside his son. Caprio looked at them both. "Gentlemen, we don't often get second hearings that end this way." Antonio's voice trembled slightly. "Your Honor, I'd like to thank you for showing my son what the bench could not. That justice isn't about being right. It's about being awake." Julian turned toward his father, words catching in his throat. "I'm sorry I used your name like a shield." Antonio's reply was barely above a whisper. "Then let's both learn to use it like a bridge." The silence that followed was heavier than applause, the kind of silence people feel when something inside them rearranges. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. "Mr. Romano, your fines are waived, not because you paid them, but because you earned them." Julian exhaled, shoulders dropping. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me," Caprio said gently. "Thank the people who taught you to stop, especially the ones who never had that luxury." He gestured toward Mrs. Davis, sitting quietly in the front row. She smiled, lifting her cane slightly. A salute. Julian stepped toward her, removed a folded vest from his arm, the same reflective one she'd loaned him. "I cleaned it," he said softly, "but I think I'll keep wearing one, just to remember." Mrs. Davis chuckled. "Good. The world's got too many people walking blind." Caprio's gavel touched the desk once, softly. Case dismissed. But no one stood. The judge leaned back, voice low, almost reflective. "You know," he said, "when I was a young prosecutor, I thought the law was about punishment. Decades later, I learned it's about permission. Permission to change. The light from the high windows caught the brass badge still resting on the evidence table. Judge 1. Antonio glanced at it, then at his son, and smiled faintly. Keep it, he said to Caprio. It belongs to the court now. As the crowd filed out, the sound of their steps filled the chamber. Not hurried, but deliberate, the measured rhythm of people remembering how to stop. Outside, Julian walked with his father under the autumn sun. The street shimmered with fresh paint, the crosswalk lines bright and unbroken. He paused at the curb, looked both ways, and waited. For once in his life, he didn't mind standing still.